if you can't successfully articulate the value of what you provide in a networking room when somebody's politely listening for 2 minutes, you have no chance when you're trying to use things like social media or digital ads or emails to get people to see you as the only logical choice. So in short, if you can't be the clearest, you have to be the loudest. And that is, in the networking room, you've got to go to more networking rooms. And if you're on social media, you'll end up taking a photo of your donut for something to say because you're trying to stay relevant.
Hello, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I am so excited. We have a special guest today. And yes, I mean special, like he's coming to ProfitCon. Okay, he's coming to ProfitCon to talk to us nerdy accountants. Like Mike McCallow has actually invited him out. So this is a real big deal, guys. His name is Matthew Pollard, and Matthew is responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar business success stories. Yes, 5, not 1 million, but multi-million-dollar success stories. And he did this all before the age of 30. He's got humble beginnings. He's faced adversities, and he has an epic rise to success that he really wants to share this story with everybody. And Forbes calls him the real deal. They call him the real deal. He's on the Global Gurus list of top 30 sales professionals, also named in the top sales world magazine. They actually called him the top 50 speaker. So he's listed in that. And he is on the BigSpeak list. So very, very good. And today he's going to talk to us about some secrets, right? Some secrets that I know you guys are listening to podcasts. So even if you're in manufacturing, even if you're in government, I know you geek out on numbers, right? You geek out on profit. You want to understand those financials. But today what he's going to do is he's going to talk about the introvert's edge to rapid growth. So please join me in welcoming Matthew Pollard to the platform. Hey, Matthew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing terrific. And I hope I can live up to that wonderful introduction. Thank you for that.
Well, we are so excited to find out. And first of all, since we're talking about the introvert's edge to rapid growth, let's talk about, first of all, how do we differ from extroverts? Like, what's the normal rapid growth look like? Well, why introvert? Why this topic? And really, why are we so different?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, when you think about sales systemization or differentiation or leadership or really anything, systems always outperform anything else. And so realistically, what I talk about is systems. And, this isn't new stuff. Like Brian Tracy will talk about the top 10% of all sales performers have a planned presentation. Well, introverts are better at planning than extroverts. So why is it that everybody thinks that introverts don't make great salespeople? And the answer is that there's this barrier in our head that we can't sell, that we can't network, that we're not the best leaders. We're perhaps not great on podcast interviews. We can't potentially speak from stage that well. Never mind that Mike and I are both introverts. Apparently, we just aren't built for that, right? Even though Ivan Meisner, the founder of the world's largest networking event in the world, is an introvert. Even though Zig Ziglar, the most well-known sales trainer in the world, is an introvert. Gosh, we think we can't do small talk, yet Oprah Winfrey and David Letterman are both introverts. So why do we believe this? Well, the answer is that we all just somehow bought into this gift of gab idea. And then we just decided we couldn't do it. And what I think happens for a lot of small businesses and a lot of growing businesses is that they go after their Rolodex and they get some deals. But then once they've got those deals, they don't know how to then go after new clients. They've evaporated their Rolodex and they're like, well, we'll hire a salesperson. And the only person that salesperson sells to is them, right? Oh, they're in the pipeline. We'll close that deal eventually. And it just never happens. So then they're like, well, that didn't work. So let's try digital marketing. And then they are constantly dealing with all the changes that happen in that. So what I help people realize is firstly that introverts make the best sellers, the best networkers, the best public speakers. We're not second-class citizens. Our path to success is just different. And if we embrace that, we really can create rapid growth businesses that revolve around us, our family, and our lives, not the other way around. The problem is that we're so busy trying to beat the extroverts at their game or just try and compete, we've forgotten that we actually have these amazing skills. So what I talk about when I talk about introversion is I help introverts realize that we have this amazing unparalleled powers of empathy, active listening, those things that perhaps extroverts aren't so great at. And we can also plan and prepare incredibly well. And if we leverage systems, whether it be sales systems, whether it be networking systems, whether it be systems for perhaps being very articulate on a podcast, which, for me, I have a system just for this. And if we do that, we can lean in to our introverted strengths. The problem is that a lot of people gravitate to trying to copy extroverts, which just doesn't work for us. And I believe that when we do that, we really can create these rapid growth businesses and feel a lot more authentic and congruent when we do that.
I love that. I can't tell you, Matthew, how many times, especially when I first started my business, I would stand in a room, like a networking room that was filled with extroverts, right? And they were shaking each other's hand, going up and giving each other a hug, like, oh, friend, it's so good to see you. And I remember it felt like I was playing double dutch. I just wanted to jump in, right? I just wanted to jump in. But as soon as I wanted to jump in, somebody else took the person I was going to jump in with. And I never could really find my grip in the conversation. And that's great that you bring out that introverts have different set of skills, right? And it's all about developing systems that really allow us to use our skills effectively. That's brilliant when you say that. And so my question is then, let's talk about what are the skills that we bring that we can use that actually have an edge over extroverts? Because, obviously, they're going to run up and give you a hug and you're like, who are you? And we're not going to do that. So what can we do now instead of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I will say is I don't want to make this session about extrovert bashing by any means, right? The difference is, and I know I joke about extroverts not having great empathy and not being great at active listening. The difference is that they know that those are skills that they can learn. And if they work for an organization, their head of HR will bring them aside, or their CEO or the integrator will bring them aside and say, look, you're not that empathetic. And I think that's a skill set we need to foster. And it's proven that that can be taught via coaching. So let's get you a coach to help you perhaps create that skill. But then they look at the introvert and then say, oh, poor Johnny's an introvert. He can never sell. Or we can't promote him to leadership because he's too quiet. So what we're constantly doing is putting our introverts in boxes. And if we're a business owner, we often put ourselves in a box. Like there are lots of people that don't start their own businesses because they don't think that they can be successful. And a lot of people that are in their own business that I either hire a salesperson and don't know what they're doing and they don't have a sales system because they never played in that field, even though every other part of their business is systemized. They let that be the magician's box, right? That don't look behind the curtain, which is ridiculous. So, or they just sell to the deals that happen to fall in their lap, or they spend a fortune on marketing to get more deals. But the problem is that they portray themselves in such a functional way, and we'll talk about that. But the thing I want people to understand is introverts and extroverts can both succeed. The difference is we all have our different burdens to bear, and introverts believe that theirs they can't get past. But when I say introversion, extroversion, a lot of people are like, well, what is introversion? What is extroversion? So let's make that very clear. If you draw your energy from being by yourself, you're an introvert. If you draw your energy from being with people, then you're an extrovert. Now, for me, I love networking. Like, I love it. I love speaking from stage. I love doing podcast interviews like this. But let's not lie to ourselves. I'm going to collapse after this because it drains my battery. I'm tired. It doesn't mean I can't do it well. It just means that it doesn't give me energy. It depletes it. So that also means that we need to lean into our strengths, like I discussed, of planning and preparation, right? For instance, I don't want to go to the wrong networking rooms if it's going to drain my battery. I don't want to go to the bar afterwards to have conversations with people. I want to have those conversations right there and then. So what I want to do is make sure a lot of the meetings that I have are planned and prepared. Like the number of people, like you talk about ProfitCon, the number of conferences that have apps, and you can go onto the app and find out who's going beforehand, connect with them on LinkedIn and let them know you're going and say we should run into each other. I go profile shopping. You go to meetup groups and you go through the meetup photo of the last photo that was there and ask those people that were tagged if they're going this year or this month. And if you don't like the look of them, or if you find out they sell insurance, you don't walk up to talk to them. As opposed to walking up to someone out of the blue and saying, well, what is it you do? Now they tell you they're selling insurance, your eyes explode, but there's no way out. So now you're stuck talking to them for the next 30 minutes. You've wasted a ton of time. So planning and preparation is hugely important. And one of the things that I like to suggest to people is, learning how to be interested rather than interesting is something that introverts do incredibly well. And the number of people that I see, if you look at modern day networking, right? They walk into a room and they're like, do you want to buy from me? What about you? What about you? What about you? No one wants to be that person, but that's what people think successful networking is. It's not. As a matter of fact, even a lot of extroverts don't like doing it. But then they go and do a bunch of aimless networking where they walk into a room and somebody asks them what they do and they'll say something horrific like, oh, my day job is this. If you don't seem interested in it, why should they? So we then get all these business cards, we come home, we're like, okay, networking doesn't work, and we put everything on our desk. The problem is that if you can't successfully articulate the value of what you provide in a networking room when somebody's politely listening for 2 minutes, you have no chance when you're trying to use things like social media or digital ads or emails to get people to see you as the only logical choice. So in short, if you can't be the clearest, you have to be the loudest. And that is, in the networking room, you've got to go to more networking rooms. And if you're on social media, you'll end up taking a photo of your donut for something to say because you're trying to stay relevant. I focus on being super clear, and that allows me to leverage my other two strengths. So once I've planned and prepared, which introverts are great at, I'm then able to leverage my other strengths of planning and of empathy and active listening. So I will ask questions because I'm genuinely interested in the answer. I will actively listen, and I'll suggest people that I can introduce them to. I will, if they've said they've had a rough day, I can empathize with them rather than just getting into, oh, that's fine, well, I offer this. What I focus on is that if you do strategic networking, you can leverage the ability to active listen, the ability to empathize really, really well. And instead of saying something, I'm not suggesting a contrived elevator pitch. I hate those things. Like, I do this for this group of people, even if they have this common problem. Disgusting. And it doesn't work online either. So what I would suggest, though, is there are other ways that you can convey passion and mission. We can talk about that. But again, with planning and preparation, I'm able to do that. I'm able to provide the best version of myself to the world. What happens is, and it's funny, I spoke to a scientist just before this, and she loves the fact that she changes one thing and she can just see whether it's working or blowing up in their face. Well, if you go to a networking room, you say a different thing to everyone every time, if you sell in a different way every time, if you throw up a whole bunch of things on social media and it's not planned, there's no strategy, you don't know who your market is, of course it's going to fail. Now, the thing that I love about introverts is that when we discover a system that works, we hold on to it for dear life. We're happy to say the same thing every time. Because when we do, we know that that's the reason for success. And it hides us away from rejection, because if they're rejecting it, they're rejecting the process. So we look at how we can improve it. Extroverts, on the other hand, and this is why I think extroverts make the best selling, best at sales, they're the best at networking, they're best public speakers, is extroverts love to wing things. So even if you get them to own a system, next week they're off winging it somewhere else or saying things that they shouldn't be saying because they love the fact that they can wing things. It just doesn't lead to a rapid growth business.
Definitely. And I can see that too. It's not going to lead to a rapid growth system because it's not replicable, right? They're not able to replicate those results or replicate that system or teach it to somebody else, right? And in order to have rapid growth, you have to be able to train others to do your job. And if you can't remember what you did last time, because I call it throwing paint at the wall, you're not going to be successful. So that's very true. We are going to take that process. And I say we because I am an introvert, right? In order to create that process and find out what works. So definitely, I think that is a great idea with that. I also like too, Matt, what you talked about too with that. And it's really about introversion isn't necessarily an inability to talk to people, right? It's not the inability to communicate or connect. It just means that it's draining, right? We'd rather do something else is really what it means. And so being intentional about that time, being intentional about getting in the right room. And I think that's important because I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we spray ourselves, right? We go to the conference circuit. We try to talk to as many people as we can, but it's not about quantity, it's about quality of the connection, right? It's about who you're talking to. Like you said, if you don't work with insurance companies, don't go try to network with a bunch of insurance brokers, right? Work with who your ideal client is or who you're going to be better aligned with. That is going to be more important from that standpoint. So really, really great advice on that. And so let's talk about where we go wrong. I know we kind of talked about it a little bit off air. We were having an amazing discussion about upcoming ProfitCon, but we had a discussion about copying, right? We try to throw off that introversion, right? We try to hide ourselves as something else. Let's talk about that a little bit more, Matt.
You know what's interesting? Obviously, of course, we copy a lot of extroverts and we think the secret to success is doing what those extroverts do. In truth, it doesn't even work that well for them, right? The number of extroverts that don't have rapid growth businesses that hustle and they look more successful because they're the wheelers and dealers, they're getting the cards and those people are like, yeah, I'll meet with you. They're not buying from them. Now, sure, some people buy, but not a lot of them. And that's not rapid growth, that's survival. They may be surviving a little bit more than you, but as you said, you can't replicate it, right? That's the problem. So what I find is for introverts, what they really have to look at is what's unique about them, right? Because if you don't know what's unique about you, how can you be your authentic self, right? So what happens, and I mean, accountants is a great example, right? Accountants say, well, no, I'm just exactly the same as everyone else. Well, that's not true. There's unique life experience, unique past background that perfectly qualifies you to help a demographic of people. Now, funnily enough, in the accounting world, I'm always blown away by hearing, and we talked about this offline, people are like, oh, I'm booked out 150%. That's great. No, it's not. I'm way too busy. Okay, well then why don't you put up your prices? No, I couldn't put up my prices. Everyone will leave. No, they won't. But they won't as long as you do things correctly. I worked with an accountant recently. We put up their prices by 430%. They retained 83% of their clients. And all it was, let's face it, it's not a saturated market. People are leaving the industry like crazy. But so let's talk about it though. Let's forget about the accountant world, because I know that your audience is accountants, but a lot of other people. So for those people that are at ProfitCon, I'll tell you more about how to do that as an accountant when you come. But let's use an example outside the industry. So let's talk about something, kind of what you'd imagine is hugely saturated. Something like language coaching, right? So let's imagine, I worked with a client out of California. She was a Mandarin teacher. She taught kids and adults Mandarin. And for the longest time, she charged $50 to $80 an hour for private consultation, and she was successful. But then over time, there were people moving into California, and they were willing to charge less money to get their first clients. So she was losing her current clients. She was struggling to get new clients. Now also, and this is something accountants definitely struggle with, is we now live in this global economy. So there were people in China offering to do this for $12 an hour. I'll teach you Mandarin, and they're offering to do it on Craigslist. On top of that, there's now technology where I'll teach you Mandarin, you teach me English, we just won't charge anyone anything. So now she's competing against free. So she comes to me and she's like, Matt, how do I compete in this crowded marketplace? Like, I need to figure out how to sell more effectively. And this is what I find most people get wrong, right? They think that it's their ads not performing, or they think it's their networking ability is not performing, or their sales ability is not performing. These are tactics. The tactics don't work because you've not done the strategic work that you need to do. So what I did is I started to look at all of the clients she'd worked with, because if we had started with sales, she would have already lost. So what I did is I took a step back and I said, all right, what clients is she doing unique things for? And what I discovered is she worked with hundreds of clients over the years, but there were two executives that she helped with far more than just language education. These were executives being relocated to China, and she helped them understand, firstly, she helped them understand the difference in rapport in China versus the Western world. Like, here, if we're really bad at sales, at the end of a 45-minute meeting, we might say, do you want to move forward? And they'll say, yes, no, or let me think about it. If they still say they want to think about it 7 days from now, we know the chances of getting that sale are going down and down. In China, they're going to want to see you 5 or 6 times before they discuss business. They're probably going to want to see you drunk over karaoke once or twice. It's just who they are. But she needed to help them understand that. On top of that, the difference in e-commerce in China and the Western world is very different, and she had to help them understand that. And the importance of respect, like how to handle a business card, why it matters, how to reduce your accent, because learning the language isn't enough. And I'm like, look, Wendy, stop. You're doing so much more for these people than just language tuition. What are you doing? He's like, well, they're just a few things. I'm just trying to help. And this is what happens with everybody. They're stuck in their functional skill. Somebody asks them what they do and they say, I'm an accountant, or I'm a Mandarin education coach or tutor, or whatever you want to call it, right? They fit in this box and it's impossible to get out, which is why their life is spent in this hamster wheel of struggling to find interested people, trying to set themselves apart, and feeling like people only care about price when they get involved in the sales conversation. So I said, Wendy, you're stuck in your functional skill. Is it a result of the assistance? Is it fair to say, as a result of the assistance you're giving these people, are they going to be more successful in China? And she's like, well, yeah, that's the point, right? I said, great. Let's call you the China Success Coach then. Forget about Mandarin for a second. Let's create what we ended up calling the China Success Intensive. It was a 5-week program with the executive, the spouse, and any children being relocated to China. Now, she loved the idea of this, but she's like, well, who do I sell it to? What she's asking is, who do I network to? Who do I send digital ads to? Who do I sell to? And what I said is, well, let me take a step back for a second and let me ask you, who do you think you should sell it to? You said, oh, that's easy. The executive. Makes sense. I was terrified moving from Australia to the United States, but I don't think it's your ideal client. She's like, well, the companies would pay, which also makes sense. Like, they make millions of dollars a lot of times on an executive being successful. I'm like, I don't think so, though. She's like, well, who then? I think it's the immigration attorney. And she looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. And I said, well, think about it. These people, they have spent, they maybe make $7,000 to do the visa. They got to do the bureaucracy that comes with that, the paperwork, they got staff to pay for, they got to get the client, which isn't free, and they've got office rent to pay for. They'd be lucky to make $3,000. Offer them $3,000 for a simple introduction that results in a sale. They loved the idea. They're like, double my income for a simple introduction. What have I got to say? And all she said is, look, just tell them they've now got their visa. Congratulations. Are you ready to go to China? They'll always say, yes, we've got our visa now. Thank you. We've got our place sorted. We're learning the language. Kids are getting pretty good at it too. Just respond. There's a lot more to it than that. I think you need to speak to the China success coach. She then got on the easiest sale in the world, right? These people were terrified to go. The companies were motivated to pay, and she was recommended by their attorney. She charged $30,000 for doing this 5-week program. Minus the $3,000 commission, she made $27,000 for the easiest sale in the world, instead of struggling every day for $50 to $80 an hour. So let's take a look at that for a second, because she's just gone into a niche that she was already servicing. She was just doing it for free. And now she's got these easy sales by not even networking for the same group of people. That is what I call the power of understanding your unified message, the thing that separates you. And you get to that by saying, what are the things I do outside the scope of my functional skill? And what is the higher level benefit of that? For Wendy, it was respect, rapport, and e-commerce. The higher level benefit, China success. For me, I'm a branding expert. I'm a social media strategist. I'm a sales expert. I'm a master in neuro-linguistic programming. I'm in marketing. Who cares? Nobody cares. They don't care how long it took me to learn these things or how hard it was for me to learn it. But when I say I'm the rapid growth guy, the simplicity of that message is what gets me heard in the crowded marketplace. So if you're an introvert and you find it uncomfortable competing against everyone else, then avoid the battle altogether like Wendy did, like I do, and become an entity in your own right. And everyone, and introverts are very humble, everybody has unique past experiences, unique background that allows them to serve a different customer. The problem is, especially the accountants, you spent so long trying to get into this club, you've forgotten there's things that are unique about you. But every business so much focuses on the things that took them time to learn and forget about those amazing things. And just so you know, there is no one that pays you a ridiculous amount of money or any amount of money that's above what anyone else can do on a regular basis. There's no one that sings your praises unless you do something that's truly unique. Most people, they don't lean into that. They just ignore it and they keep fighting on functional skill, which means they keep fighting on price.
Ooh, that was some juicy morsels there. Oh my gosh, guys, did you guys hear that? Oh my gosh, like strategy there. That was so cool, Matthew. Thank you. That was so amazing. And you're absolutely right. You know, especially early on in our careers, early on in our business, that's exactly what we do. We try to carbon copy, right? What we think is successful, right? We Google our industry. We look at what other people are doing. We charge what they are charging. We try to price match or just present ourselves a little bit lower, right? And blend in, right? That's what we try to do. You're absolutely right. And you're right. When we blend in, we're paid average, right? Because nobody's going to pay anything exorbitant for average that you can get anywhere. And you're right. I talk to so many entrepreneurs and they tell me, you know, Suzanne, I am busy. I'm swamped. And I'm like, well, let's raise prices because your cost has gone up. And they're like, oh, I can't do that. You know, and you're absolutely right with that. We commoditize ourselves. I know in our industry, and we talked about a little bit offline, the AICPA says that 50% of CPAs are boomers and they are going to be retiring in the next 10 years. Guys, there's a shortage of us, okay? There's a shortage, right? Why are we commoditizing? There's a shortage. They're retiring. They've already gone home because of COVID, right? People calling, CPAs aren't calling back because they're busy, right? So there's opportunity there, no matter what industry you are. You know, there's signs. I'm going to confess my bad eating habits. I went to Burger King, right? I was in a drive-thru and they said, please be patient with those that did show up today. You know, people are not showing up to work. If you're showing up, you're already above average, right? You're already out there. So definitely standing in that fact that you're remarkable, right? And standing in that uniqueness is such good advice there with that, Matthew. Just so good there. Now, in terms of like other things that our audience might need to be aware of about introverts, please share your advice with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, let's just going back to what you highlighted there, because I mean, the reason why your accountant buddies can't put up their prices is because they're scared to, because they don't have a sales system. And introverts can sell amazingly well with a sales system because they'll follow it methodically. And the best way for them to do that is through storytelling. I mean, storytelling is amazing. I mean, firstly, it short circuits the logical mind. You speak directly to the emotional mind. So, by the way, the logical mind's going, I'm not sure if I'm okay with that. I'm not sure if my situation responds to, needs that. You know, I don't have time for this, hang up, or like, let me think about it. the emotional part of the brain hears a story and literally short circuits that part of the brain and goes story time, and it just listens. And even better, this is why I always start, my podcast interviews with stories, is because it activates the reticular activating system of the brain, which means that it creates artificial rapport that we introverts can turn into real rapport because it synchronizes our brains. It's amazing. It's why when I get on stage, I start with a story. And more importantly than all of that, people remember up to 22 times more information when embedded into a story. So for those people that have very complex sales or complex products or services, right? A lot of times accountants, engineers, people in the medical space, technology companies, they feel like it's their responsibility to educate the client. But they're doing that because they don't know how to sell, right? So they're opening up this fire hose of information and they're hoping something lands and the customer's like, oh, I need that. Let's work together. Well, no, that's not what you should be doing. What you should be doing is telling a story. First thing, it'll develop rapport. Secondly, it'll allow you to serve your clients more, which, by the way, the definition of sales is to serve. It literally is derived from the Scandinavian word to serve. And the best way, and by the way, this comes with a duty of care. Don't use story if your product's terrible or if you offer a bad service, because I don't want to help people do that. But if you offer a great service that actually helps your clients, the best way to help them is to get them out of their own way. So short circuit their logical mind, use the science to develop that rapport, and then make sure they remember all the jargon in the story so it becomes tangible. If you don't believe me, by the way, let's think of 3 random items. Imagine I asked you to remember chairs, the things we sit in, porridge, the thing we eat for breakfast, and beds, what we sleep in. I always explain it because my Australian accent plays up sometimes. So imagine chairs, porridge, beds. I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask you in a year from now, are you going to remember those items? No way, no chance. Whenever I speak from stage, I play around with this and people are like, I'm like, who believes in John remembering those items? Nobody believes in John. Well, here's the thing. If I told you the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears, instant recall, right? She sat in some chairs, she ate some porridge, she slept in some beds. So if you grab your functional jargon and attach it to a story, like I did with Wendy, not only are you fostering rapport and exciting and motivating the client, you're also helping them understand how the process of working with you is going to look. So it's super powerful. So story is one of the best things that introverts can use in networking, in sales, in leadership. Get people behind the story of why they should work here, why they're making a difference, why this KPI. All of those things are incredibly important. And also, by the way, all that jargon you don't need to tell them, you tell them anyway because it makes you feel better. They don't need to know that. That's not helping them get out of their own way. You know their product works, is going to help them. So sell them the product, tell them the story, and it stops you from putting all that jargon in because it doesn't fit into a story. So for introverts more specifically, story is a really powerful thing. And the last thing that I would suggest is, and let's go back, let's consider the concept of a networking room, right? Like if you go into networking and, you're in a situation where somebody asks you what you do, and just so you know, you shouldn't automatically go into that. Be interested before you're interesting. Introverts are great at that. But when somebody asks you what you do, you're like, oh, I'm an accountant. And people scream, they're like, how do I get away from this? It's going to be a boring conversation, right? It's what happens. But imagine if I said I was in sales, people look at me like I'm one step above a scam artist, right? Like if it's an introvert, which is the marketplace I'm put on this earth to serve, they're like, oh, it doesn't work for me. Now I'm trying to convince them that I can help. I'm starting from behind. But if I say I'm in marketing, they're like, oh, I need marketing. How much do you cost? Now I'm talking about price. I just met them. Or they say, oh, I've got a marketer, thanks anyway. And I'm like, oh, but I'm different. I've got magic ruby slippers. It doesn't work. So what I do is I respond with, I'm the rapid growth guy, full stop. Because they're going to ask me what that is. And then on their invitation, I can then tell them. But I'm not going to say, and this is what most people do, I'm an accountant. I work with small businesses to help them, obviously with their tax needs. Or, I work with, I'm a copywriter and I write copy for any business that will hire me, which by the way, isn't exciting. Like if you don't have a niche, there is something wrong. I wish we had more time to talk about that. But when somebody comes and asks me, what is the rapid growth guy? I don't say the elevator pitch. I do this for this group of people, even if. What I do is I will actually talk about my passion and mission. I want to impart with them that I actually care. So I will respond with, and by the way, introverts hate talking about themselves. So when you say, when you feel like we're promoting our resume, we won't do it. So because of that, my suggestion is that you frame it this way. And this is, I love to see, I hate to see, and I'm on a mission to. It's a simple framework. But basically what you'll say is, one of the things I love to see more than anything in the world is an amazing introverted service provider with enough talent, skill, and belief in themselves to start a business of their own. But what I find more often than not, and I just hate seeing this, is they get stuck in this endless hamster wheel of struggling to find interested people, trying to set themselves apart, really trying to make a sale, feeling like often people care about one thing, price. Do you know anyone like that? And of course, if I've done my planning and preparation, I'm in a networking room full of small business owners, name a business owner that doesn't really struggle for that. They're few and far between. So they're going to respond with yes, especially if I've connected with them up front, they know a little bit about me. So then I'm going to say, well, I'm on a mission to help introverts realize that they're not second-class citizens. Their path to success is just different. But it doesn't come from getting better at their functional skill. They're usually amazing at that. Instead, it comes from focusing on 3 things outside the scope of their functional skill that really allow them to obtain a business that revolves around them, their family, and their life, not the other way around. Actually, let me give you an example. Then I might tell a story, maybe the story of Wendy. But think about the way I put that together. I didn't tell you what I do because I can explain that in the story. No one cares. What they care about is that I'm passionate. I understand the situation they're in and I'm passionate about serving them, right? This is what you're struggling with. I hate seeing this. This is where I want to get you. I love seeing this and I'm on this mission. At that point, they are bought in and they want to lean forward. If you convey that online, you convey that in speaking events, on podcasts like I'm doing with everybody now, people are, oh my gosh, this person actually cares. He's not a sales trainer. He's not a marketing person. He's the rapid growth guy. And when you can position yourself that way, whether you're the China success coach, I worked with someone that was a copywriter. We used that as an example. And she called herself the mission maven. And she focused on then helping health tech companies. And her business exploded in a marketplace you really can't connect to. And she was miles away. Like she lived in a little remote suburb in Chicago. And now she's got clients, health tech companies all over the world. She was actually recently acquired because they were like, we don't understand how you're getting these clients. You can do it. And we made fun of insurance people as well. So I'll recover there. I know we worked with a client called the Hustle Lifeguard, and he is now, a feature in my book because he was able to rapidly grow an insurance business. It really doesn't matter what business it is. It really comes down to saying, what's my point of difference? What's my unified message? What niche am I going to after? What stories can I utilize to excite and inspire while embedding myself as the only logical choice? And how do I convey my passion and mission? If you want to obtain rapid growth, it doesn't matter if you're hiring someone, they don't care about how much you pay them until they see whether or not you're providing an impact, especially people of our generation, right, and younger. They want to make sure they're making a significant impact. Unemployment's at 2%. They can get a job anywhere. They want to make money while they have an impact. They'll even accept a lower wage to make an impact. So speaking about passion and mission allows you to get staff. Speaking about passion and mission allows you to retain staff. Telling stories gets your staff aligned with hitting KPIs. As an introvert, we can plan these stories in advance so that we don't have to be dynamic. Because and it's funny, there's 2 introverts, you're interviewing me, I'm talking, and I'm sure neither of us seem like introverts. But here's what happened. You asked me a bunch of questions beforehand to be prepared. And I am customizing, because empathy muscle is something introverts have, I'm customizing what I say for your audience, for your unique questions. But we're talking about my zone of genius, and I have practiced. I've done over 100 interviews just like this, and I've practiced different combinations to make sure that methodically what I present works incredibly well every single time. And you can do the same thing. And this isn't about following scripts because scripts sound robotic. That's lack of practice. The telemarketers you hear speaking on the phone at 8 o'clock at night while you're eating your dinner that you don't want to talk to, they're reading off a script. That's why it's horrible. Leonardo DiCaprio also reads off scripts. He sounds a lot more engaging because he's practiced it. And he's playing a character that he is not. You are just learning to present the best version of yourself. So instead of reflecting, go, why didn't I say that? Instead, plan what you're going to say so that you do say that in advance. You're ready and then you do it on the day. So introversion, it really just comes down to planning. It's got nothing to do with whether we can. As a matter of fact, we can better than most. It just has to do with where we get our energy. And once we plan and prepare, we can do exceptionally well and it takes less of our energy. When I did my first podcast interview, I was wiped for the day. Now I'll be wiped for about 15 minutes.
I love it. And you're right. We have to give ourselves that grace to be able to spend that time figuring out what is the best version of ourselves and how do we want to show up and the time to practice. I think a lot of people, they're like, why should I have to practice a pitch? Why should I have to practice how I'm going to present myself? But it does make a difference. As silly as it is, just go in a closet, close the door. Nobody will watch you, right? And just practice how you want it to sound, right? Practice, put it together. And I love about your story too, because what you just did, Matthew, is you just gave me a testimonial of how you changed this woman who really taught people how to interact when they go to China and have a great experience, and how you helped her even figure that out, that was her zone of genius. And I'm like, oh, I want you to do that for me too. That is just so awesome. And again, you were telling a story, but really you were sharing your experience and how you helped somebody else and sharing that testimony. So that was so incredible there with that standpoint. Now, I know that we're winding down on time and it was so much juiciness. I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe we can have them back because this is so good. Like systems, like first of all, how do we find like what we're good at? I've got so many questions on that. But Matthew, one of the things that we like to ask our guests as we wind down, is if you could leave our viewers and listeners, right, our introverts, because y'all know you guys are introverts to be like numbers people. If you could leave us with one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
Sure. Well, actually, I'll do two things. So for those people that want to create their own unified message and niche, you don't have to hire me for that. If you go to matthewpollard.com/growth, you can download that template. Now, don't do it with someone else in your industry, right? Do it with someone else. Get them to listen to this podcast, understand what a unified message is, and then do it with them. But, I've done this. It's a 5-step template. It'll help you create your unified message and discover your niche of willing to buy clients. And, I did this at the National Freelance Conference, nearly 200 people in the room. And I said, look, do me a favor, put your hand up if you now have a message that'll excite and inspire and a niche of people that you think will pay you what you're worth. Like 97% of the room put their hands up, which sounds great until I said, look, do me a favor, keep your hands up if this is the most time, not reading books on marketing, but actively applying marketing that you've spent, since you started your business. 80% of the room kept their hands up. So, the whole session was only 90 minutes long. So the key is this works if you spend the time doing it. I would highly recommend that people go to matthewpollard.com/growth, download that template, do it with a partner, and you'll get the answers you're looking for. That being said, that brings me to the best piece of advice I can give you, and that is most introverts tend to do what I call busy procrastination. They overcomplicate things. And because of that, they don't take any action. And, Robert Kiyosaki said that unless, entrepreneurs, the reason why there's not more of them is that we're uncomfortable with uncertainty. If we can't see all the lights as green, we don't move forward. Well, accountants, if you don't know all the pieces, like you're risk adverse. So maybe you don't jump down this and maybe you struggle in business and charge not what you're supposed to for a longer period of time, or you make the decision to jump anyway. So one of the suggestions that I make is don't wait for all the lights to be green. Come up with the unified message, discover the niche, go out to networking events, validate, because if it doesn't resonate, you need to change it, you need to adapt, but learn by doing and learn by perfecting a system that's going to allow you to create growth rather than doing busy procrastination, which is hiding behind the busy work, even though you know that you should be allocating time to this.
I love that. And you're so right. You got us pen there as accountants, the analysis paralysis, right? And we get stuck in that valley, right? Of not moving forward, but it's about figuring things out on the way there. And what does John Maxwell say? Build your wings on the way down, right? That's what it's about. So very, very good advice. Now, Matthew, how do our viewers contact you? I know you mentioned matthewpollard.com, and I'm definitely going to list that on the show notes, but how do we contact you to work with you to learn more about really creating a system? Because we all want to see rapid growth.
Absolutely. Well, firstly, and I'm all for the figuring it out on the way down, but remember, you don't have to you don't have to fire all your current clients to do this, right? I mean, truthfully, your current clients don't care if you call yourself a dentist on your website now, right? They love you, they work with you, they get great results. They're not going to change. Even they'll still refer you, and the referrals don't care if you call yourself a dentist on your website. So what I would suggest to you is this is a new market acquisition strategy, and you should treat it as such. So we talked about the matthewpollard.com/growth, but a lot of people probably here today probably think that they're an introvert, they can't network, they can't sell. So let's break those boundaries. So yes, you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd happily, if you can send me questions there. I provide a ton of free content on YouTube because I actually had a reading speed of a 6th grader in late high school. I was super introverted. I learned to sell by watching YouTube videos. I lost my job just before Christmas. I was doing data entry actually. If it wasn't for YouTube and the decision that sales had to be a system, there was no way I would be where I am today. And because of that, I put a ton of free content out there as well. But for those people, like I have 2 books, both of them, they're in 16 languages now. They've sold nearly 100,000 copies. It's called the Introverts Edge book series. The first one is on sales. So if you believe you can't sell, go to theintrovertsedge.com and I will first convince you that you as an introvert will make an amazing salesperson. And then in the first chapter, you don't have to buy the book for this, right? My publisher hates me when I say this. In the first chapter, I will give you the 7 headings that you need to fall under for a sales process. Grab what you currently say, put it into that, and you'll realize very quickly some things don't fit. Throw that out. You shouldn't be saying it to clients. Then you'll realize there's some things out of order. Fix that. And then you'll realize there's some gaping holes. Plug those holes. You'll double your sales in the next 60 days. And if you think you can't network, then go to theintrovertsedge.com/networking, and I'll do the exact same thing. I'll convince you can network, and I'll break down the system for you as well in the first chapter.
I love that. Very, very good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Matthew's information in the show notes again so that you guys can contact him with his website, his LinkedIn, so that you guys can best contact him to learn more and work with him and also get his book too, which is a great book. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your wisdom and really giving us inspiration about what we can do as introverts to get that rapid growth, and that we actually do have the advantage. So thank you very much.
It was my absolute pleasure. It was lovely to spend some time with you, and thank you so much for having me.